some closing thoughts about the Brock Turner rape case, because I do feel, as I said in our interview with journalist Alex Zielinski, I do feel that this is an important teachable moment for all of us in our culture. I want to start with this letter from Brock Turner, the rapist's father, who wrote to the judge and said, among other things, "I'm writing this letter to tell you about my son Brock and the person I know he is." And by the way, I'm depending to a certain extent on Alyssa Peterson's interpretation based on her understanding of Title IX and related issues of sexual violence. "I'm writing this letter to tell you about my son Brock and the person I know he is." Well, first of all, I'm not sure you know who he is, if he was capable of committing this deed. Alyssa makes that point, and I think she's absolutely right about that. And I would also add, as I mentioned in the conversation earlier, that I am a father. And I'm a father of both a daughter and a son. And I can tell you that if my son, who he never would, but if he had ever committed any crime remotely like this, I can tell you that I would be utterly devastated, utterly remorseful, and searching my soul to find out what I could possibly have done wrong to raise a son that, drunk or sober, could ever perform such a deed. The fact that Brock Turner's father thinks he is so privileged, comes from a place of such privilege, that he does not even indulge, apparently, in a moment's self-reflection, that he does not go before the judge and say, "I failed as a father. Please take that into consideration when punishing my son." The fact that that doesn't even occur to him, frankly, to me, does speak volumes about the entitlement culture of our country. And he goes on to say, he keeps, as Alyssa points out, he keeps talking about, quote unquote, what occurred that night. He wishes he could go back in time and change it, but he never says what actually happened. And read the victim's description of what happened. It is horrific. Read about the tears that were wept by the two Swedish graduate students who interrupted him, chased him down, and caught him. The father says the impact on his son has been devastating. Well, I don't celebrate anybody's suffering, but we are talking about what are the inevitable consequences of being caught and convicted for a despicable act. And, I will also say that this is the letter which received a great deal of notoriety, because he said at one point, "My son should not be punished for, out of a 20-year life, what amounts to, I forget what he called it, 20 minutes of action," I believe was his phrase. Well, first of all, the monstrosity in that phrase, the extent to which the true nature of the crime is being denied. It only takes a moment to kill a person, for example. So the fact that anybody could think about this in such arithmetic terms, that it's only 20 minutes, as if somehow that was a mitigating circumstance, and think about what he did in the other minutes. Well, clearly the judge did a little too much thinking about that. And that leads to our last point. First of all, I think if we are going to escape our culture, which is too tolerant of sexual violence against women, we need to understand what is wrong with a father like this. And we also need to look long and hard at a judge who would hand down a sentence like this, claiming that hard prison time would have a terrible effect on the young man. Well, it would. And you know what? Hard prison time has a terrible effect on a lot of people. So why don't you apply the same standard to all your defendants, not just the ones who went to the same university as you did, or who were Stanford athletes as you are. We need prison reform, but most of all, we need to end this culture of sexual violence.